Hey team, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Paul Wood. I'm a doctor of psychology, but I'm also a convicted murderer. Oh, let's just feel the weight of that for a second, eh? Now, I'm filming this clip because I was contacted by a student of criminology, Maya, recently asking about my experience of stigma from incarceration. And it's such an interesting question, eh? Stigma, that taint upon us based upon our background or who we're perceived as being that negatively impacts us, that has people judge us harshly. Now, I was lucky in the sense that unlike most people who are released from prison, I already had a pathway to employment, so I didn't have to worry about the stigma of my background in terms of being given a chance to get a job, because that's one I often speak to people about, and it can be a real struggle. And shout out to all the organisations out there who actually do give people a chance, because if you don't give people a chance, then what hope is there for them, eh? In terms of living a better life and being better people. But I was lucky, I missed that stigma. I've definitely had stigma around people judging me from a moral perspective based on my background. I've had people make comments to me. I remember once when I was in a prison visit, and there was someone there who I didn't know who was part of the visit as well, who had come along, and we were having an intellectual conversation about something, and I had a different opinion than them. And I remember them saying, well, I'm not going to argue with you. I don't know what you might do. And I just was like, whoa, that is a really good reality check in terms of how some people will perceive me based on my background. I've also had some people send me emails and contact me to let me know what a scumbag they think I am and that. But those are pretty few and far between, to be honest. Which also makes sense, right? Because I'm sure most people who are judging me harshly from a moral perspective either are too busy with their own lives or are too sensible to go and seek potential conflict with someone who has a history of violence, right? There's no risk to them, but you can understand how that would be a wise concern for anyone, right? The experience of stigma I've more personally experienced has been around trying to find places to live. These days I'm super lucky, I live in a house with my wife and my kids, there's no hassles there. It's our family home here long term. However, I remember a point where I was working as a professional, my background wasn't commonly known or that commonly known, and I was trying to find a room to rent. I couldn't afford to rent a whole place by myself, and so I was going through ads and I was going along and seeing these rooms and meeting people and applying to be able to rent a room in a house. And I would have these interactions with people and I'd think, yeah, we got on really well, and I definitely met the criteria in terms of being, an employed professional who could cover the rent no problem and who was considerate and all of these things. And then I would walk away from those and I'd send them a follow-up message going, hey, really like the room, definitely keen, to move in if that's possible. But also I felt a moral obligation to let them know about my background. And the reason for that is imagine if I moved in, then someone found out about my background and it was super distressing or traumatic for them. I just didn't think that would be fair. They needed to make an informed decision around that. And so I would say, hey, before you make a decision, just want to give you some information about me. And I'd send them a link to my TED Talk. Because by this point I had done a TED Talk and I really hoped that would be a good way to establish that I was so far from where I had been as a teenager when I was involved in a criminal lifestyle. But I would get all these responses which were, oh yeah, hey look, yeah, that was really nice meeting you, but we've actually got someone else who's just, a bit better for what we're after, or however they worded it. And I tell you this right now, I know that our natural tendency is to assume everything is about us and because of us, eh? If something doesn't go our way, to go, oh, it's because that person didn't like me in some way, or there was some stigma against me, or they didn't like the type of person I am. When actually most of the time that's absolute rubbish. Most of the time it's nothing to do with us. We're not the centre of other people's worlds, right? It's because they just got busy and didn't get back to us, or there genuinely was someone who was just more what they were looking for. I fully get that. But I also know how many places I applied to be able to live in, and how unlikely it is that I didn't get a shot at all if it wasn't influenced by my background. And by the way, fair enough too, right? If you're sitting there making a decision around who to have to move in, and you go, no, we've got these 2 or 3 people who could be really good, and this one's got a murder conviction. Look, the smart money is going on look, let's just not go with them. They're probably going to be great, but just in case, let's just not go with them. Hey, I would do the same thing. I'm not making a judgment around it. It's just reality here, eh? And it got to the point where I was homeless for a period. I didn't actually have anywhere that was my actual place to live. And shout out to Anaka and Tavanga for putting me up, friends of mine who actually gave me a place to stay in that period until finally I could find a place to stay on my own that I could afford. I managed to get a one room apartment because it was water damaged, and so it was really cheap rent. But that's my experience of stigma, is having real difficulty finding, a place to live. Again, I've spoken to lots of other people where the stigma's around employment or other things. But I think the reality is that, you have to work to the world according to how it is and accept that that's just par for the course, and you have to work even harder to establish trust with people. You have to work even harder in order to find somewhere to live or find somewhere to work, because your background does count against you. And you can expend all the energy you want wishing for a more fair and just world, but that's just going to be a waste of your time. You're better off focusing on what steps you can take to succeed, even though things are stacked against you based on your background, eh? Anyway, I hope that's useful. If anyone else has any other questions that they're interested in hearing about, let me know. Otherwise, wishing you all the best.